Welcome to the CHOW Podcast, hosted by Animal Friends of Wyoming County, where our mission is to help care for animals held by the Wyoming County Animal Shelter and promote responsible pet care in Wyoming County. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our CHOW Podcast. I am your host, Sam Goodell, the president of Animal Friends of Wyoming County. I believe this would be our second episode of our second season, so this is really cool. We're getting into our second season already. Today, we're going to be discussing animal hoarding, and we have a returning guest that's going to go in very detailed, in-depth conversation about animal hoarding. So before we get to our guest, though, I want to introduce, of course, my co-host for today. If I could talk, that would be great. So to the right of me is Mr. Tom Purcell, our program director. How's it going, Tom?
Very good. I'm really happy to be back here.
Good. And then to my left is our media director, Miss Kelly Shearing.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going, girl?
That's good. It's glad to be back.
Good.
Take a lot of time off in the summer to go enjoy my summer property, but and I miss it when I'm not here, so I've missed a few episodes, but I'm glad to be here today.
Yes, well, I'm very happy you're here today. I'm happy both of you are here today because this is going to be a very interesting conversation that we're talking about. Animal hoarding is a very complex and psychological breakdown, and even though our guest is not a psychologist, if I could say that right, she has had run-ins with animal hoarding in little Wyoming County, New York. So let's introduce her again. You have seen her before. You may have seen her too, but you definitely have heard her before in the podcast. She was on our very first episode.
Everybody knows Justa if you're from Wyoming County.
Everybody knows Justa. I have
Western New York.
Yes.
Right?
I had the blessing and the privilege to call her my mother, my mentor, my guider. Oh my gosh. My goiter? No, just kidding.
Oh my gosh. Justa, take over.
Yeah.
All right, Officer Goodell, take the wheel.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be back.
So for anyone who is tuning in for the first time, because we are in our second season and they probably haven't heard the first episode yet, give us a little background of who you are.
Okay. I live in Castile, had 3 sons. I'm married to my husband for 38 years, who's since passed. I became the animal control officer in 1997, in the September 2nd of 1997, and I'm still doing it. So over 25 years now, and I've seen a lot of changes in the facility and the laws. So that's kind of all about me. I've been doing this long enough to know a lot of people, or they know me more than I know them, probably. Mm-hmm. So. And the topic today is kind of one of those that when I was introduced to it at a training program that Tom and I took at Alfred, I just couldn't stop reading about it. And I had already encountered one hoarding situation when we took the course. So I was just eating the information up, trying to understand what I had dealt with and did I do it right and what could I have done better. So I think when you do when you work anywhere and if you're a good employee, you're always trying to improve what you're doing, no matter what you're doing, whether it's stacking shelves at Walmart or doing the job I do, you're always trying to better yourself. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to learn more. So I spent a lot of time studying about it.
Yeah, well, as you've said already, you've already touched upon this, and not just once in the time of this recording, but 3 times that I can think of the biggest things that you've seen of animal hoarding. You've probably seen little increments of it here or there throughout your time.
Yeah, the ones that I've dealt with in the last 5 or 6 years, we've been able to work with the pet owner without there being law enforcement involved. Or initially they were involved and then we're able to work with them. And some just run from me. So they sold their place and moved, or they were renting and they just left. So I lost track. But it's everywhere. It's in every community in some fashion. Not all animal involvement, but there's the old saying that the cat lady down the street, that she was probably in today's terms would be considered a hoarder. If she had piles of them eating at her stoop, and, you couldn't hardly smell it to get in the house, and, but yeah. It's everywhere. And if you talk to anybody who goes in and out of homes with for medical needs, a fire department or rescue squad, they'll tell you that hoarding in general is on the rise, especially in the last, I'd say, well, during COVID, I think it even got worse, but maybe in the last 10 years, we're seeing more and more of it being more known that you can't get a stretcher into a house because they've just got piles of stuff. And
I was an EMT for almost 19 years between Perry. I was on Perry for a long time. I was in East Fishkill when I was an officer down in Poughkeepsie area, and then finished my career out in Gainesville. But yeah, we ran into a lot of those situations. The ammonia smell is really what hit you first coming in. And usually if they hoarded animals, they also didn't clean up very much. There was usually a lot of newspapers and other articles all over the place. And yeah, it was tough to even begin to get to the person for medical treatment. It's a tough situation. And of course, I know you're going to delve into this more, but it is definitely a mental health situation. I was telling Tom earlier about when I was conducting warrants as an officer for state parole and U.S. Marshals. We did one, I think it was in Steuben or Chemung County. I'm not 100% sure if my memory serves me right, but it was a horrible smell. We couldn't get over it. And we got in, it was disgusting areas, like it was very dirty. But we didn't see a cat in sight. we saw no animals at all. And we were like a little perplexed about that. And at the end of the whole situation with the warrant and then talking to people and stuff, they were all up in the rafters and in the walls, and they were everywhere. But you knew they were in there. You smelt them, but you couldn't see them, which was, that's a terrible situation. But yeah.
One of the fascinating things I found out, I did take the course with Justa down in Elfridge University, but what was amazing is they're trying to stress to us, like Justa just said, it's everywhere. It's everywhere, but you're not going to believe how everywhere it really is. It can be 2 blocks away from where you live. It can be just around the corner from where you are right now. And it's happening, and it's so well hidden that we don't know it until there's a complaint about it, or we just happen to observe it. But it's everywhere, and it's such a critical problem because you're dealing with the mental illness. And when you meet some of these people and you speak with them and you ask a direct question like, what attracted you to having 115 cats in your house? And the answer was, I just love them. Yeah. And you love 115 cats that you can't even find because they're living in the walls. But it's some kind of love when you can deal with the stench and the buckets of waste, of cat waste. And who's taking care of these things? And to be honest with you, lady, who's taking care of you? Because it's apparent that nobody is. This program is great to bring this up because this is an education we all need. It's a very sad situation, but it's an education we all should read about. We should all learn about. It's a sad, sad story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of these situations happen because these people are isolated, alone. May have lost people in their lives, or they're just always been loners. And they start off with great intentions of helping unwanted animals because there are way too many unwanted animals in this world. I could do a plug for spay and neutering on that because that would control our population for sure. But it starts with a few and then it just keeps getting up, and they do love them, but they love them to death because they can't breathe in that house. Those animals can't breathe. There's all sorts of health and disease problems. They want to be doing the right thing, but it's just not the right thing. So, and it's a delicate approach to people with mental health, for sure. A lot of people get angry and say, oh my God, that's disgusting. How can they do that? Well, to them, they're doing the right thing by these animals because of their mental health. They're not knowing they're doing something terribly wrong. And you can't approach them like, what are you, stupid or whatever? You're doing something crazy and you can't tell people like that. They have mental health problems. There is a very delicate approach to that. And if you can't approach people like that, then stay out of it and let people who knows how to approach people, take care of it. Right. So.
Yeah, hoarding in general is a problem all on its own. We all understand it's a mental illness, mental disorder. When you add living creatures to it, such as whether you have children or in the case we're talking about today, cats, dogs, ferrets, rats, snakes, any animal can be deemed a hoarding animal. All depends on what the hoarder is feeling or what they're thinking or what they want. And that's when you get into the unwanted waste, the ammonia smell, the cat urine smell alone. Even just, I can't even stand it just one time a cat urinates. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't stand the smell. Can you imagine living in stuff like that? We have actually seen houses that had that in this line. And so it's devastating. And it makes you wonder what goes through their head it just keeps progressing and progressing. And do they ever realize that they're in over their head and they just don't know how to ask for help, or are they just so oblivious to it?
I think it's a little of both or
all of the above.
Yeah, all of the above.
I asked my parents the same thing. You had 7 kids. What are you doing, hoarding?
So when Tom and I took the course back in 1916, or 2016, I'm sorry.
I was like, wait a minute.
2016.
You are not that old, girl.
No. When we took the course in 2016, they hadn't yet classified it. They were working on classifying it as a mental illness. But when we were there taking the course, they hadn't gotten to that point yet. Of course, now they realize what it is. So there's a fine line between being a collector and a hoarder. So a collector is organized collections of things. They're in order. They know where they are. They're usually categorized. They're book hoarders. They know where all their books are. They know what they're doing, and they look good. They're organized. They're clean. And a hoarder is just piles of chaos. Often it's mixed with their living conditions, or it's in their bathrooms, it's in their bedrooms, their paths, they're walking on stuff, garbage gets mixed in, so it's chaos. So there is a huge difference between being a collector, and I have a lot of respect for collectors. I love that people have things they love, and they collect them, but there's a big difference. And there is a line there, I think, that a collector can go if all of a sudden it becomes more of an emotional collection than it was just, then it might be turned into hoarding. I think we all mentally can go quickly to those places, we don't realize we can.
That indicators is when you're a collector, you're very proud of your collection. When you're a hoarder, you deny it.
Yep.
Immediately. There's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
Yeah.
And oftentimes with animal hoarding, these people are not uneducated people. They're generally smart people. That's what the statistics say, that they're well educated. They come from what we call middle income. They're generally women. 80 to 85% are women, and usually between 45 and 60. That's that age where they collect more animals than they should, and the environment becomes toxic. So it's and I don't know if that's lots of things spur it on. Some of my research is. They've had several people in their life pass, and then they realize how fragile life is, so they are afraid to let go of anything they get. And they get a couple, then they want a couple more, and then a couple more. When I go out on investigations, I don't always look at the number of animals they have. I look at how they're caring for the number. You can be a person who has 30 cats, and all of them are vaccinated, all of them are neutered. There's litter pans, they're well fed, your house doesn't reek. You're welcomed in, then I can go in a house with 3 and you can hardly hold your breath in it. It's just so bad. So it doesn't necessarily mean a large amount of animals being a hoarder if you're organized with them and you take care of them. You can have 20 horses. That's not a hoarder if their horses are taken care of. Now, it's expensive to have that many animals. If you're a pet owner, these surgeries that are unplanned are not cheap. Maintaining them is not cheap. Neutering them is not cheap. Taking care of them day to day is not cheap. So if you have a lot of them, it's either a priority in your life and they're taking good care of them, or they fall by the wayside and their health deteriorates and they can't take care of that. And more
That's
and more.
where you get into that certain type of overwhelmed caregiver type of a
Yep.
hoarder, where it is a hoarder. It's just not with the intent of
Yep.
doing it. It just happens. Or
Yeah.
things like
COVID didn't help one bit, because what people found themselves doing is, I'm home so much. I'm here all the time. I'm not working. I guess I could take care of a couple more dogs. And it got ridiculous. People were adopting dogs they had no business adopting, and now subsequently they're being returned. And some shelters are being overwhelmed by the return of these poor animals. This is another effect of COVID.
So, Officer Goodell, when you go out to people's homes, you look at something that you call the 5 freedoms,
I do.
right?
I do.
Something that helps indicate if you've encountering a hoarding situation or even an animal abuse situation too.
Right.
Right.
Right. So you are looking at, there's 5 things we watch for. And you can have a couple and then not have a couple. So it doesn't necessarily mean if you don't have all 5 that you've got a problem. You can still address it. But I'll list them. A freedom for hunger and thirst, which is by providing enough fresh water and the right type of an amount of food to keep them fit. So you look for that. Freedom from discomfort by making sure that the animals have the right type of environment, including shelter and somewhere comfortable to rest. Freedom from pain, injury, or disease by preventing them from getting ill or injured, or by making sure animals are diagnosed and treated rapidly if they do. The freedom to express normal behaviors by making sure animals have enough space, proper facility, and the company of other animals of their own kind. And I'll talk about some of these. The last one was freedom of fear by making sure their conditions and treatment avoid mental suffering. So I did go out a few years ago on a complaint, and they had chickens between 2 dog kennels. And these chickens were just huddled up together. Dogs are barking, trying to get at them. And I know some people don't think chickens mean that much, but that environment for those chickens, they couldn't understand why their chickens weren't laying. While we're talking, they go, our chickens never lay, and they peck each other's feathers, and they're always huddle up. Well, they had 3 coon hounds on one side and 3, I think they were red bone, or they were the red dogs.
Red tick.
Like a red coon hound type. And they were hunting them all. They were cage to cage, and these poor animals. So that's fear. I mean, constant fear.
That's torture.
Yes. So, I mean, I had to talk to them about that. And sometimes you go out and you find some things are good, but some things aren't. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of my grip to change, but at least they're making some kind of effort to do some things right. So we look for those things, and we have to bring it to their attention that, you got a problem here and we need to address it. So
like freedom from hunger and thirst, providing enough fresh water, the right type and amount of food to keep them fit. What does it say under ag and market cruelty and laws and things like that when someone has their dog outside or anything? What's it required on the
in
law?
New York State, because every state is a little different, as long as there's appropriate shelter for the dog. So you can't take a little dog house and put a St. Bernard in it. It would be fine for a beagle or a Pomeranian, but it wouldn't. So you have to have the appropriate size for the dog to be able to lay down and turn around from the tip of its tail to the tip of his nose without touching anything, if you were to do it in a circle area. So you have to have an appropriate shelter for it. And in New York State, if you do in the winter, you need to make sure it's insulated. And I don't recommend the igloos because I don't think they cover the conditions in the dead of winter here. They're probably okay for 10 degrees and up, but you get below 0. The bedding you put in, you want to make sure that if there is snow in it or there is urine in it or any kind of wetness, it can seep down. So putting a blanket just freezes and it stays wet. So I recommend straw or hay so that at least they can clean it out and it will filter down and the dog can lay on the top where it's dry. But unfortunately, in New York State, we still don't have what we call a doghouse law, which I'd like to see where they're not allowed to be chained up outside at all.
Exactly. I don't understand why anybody gets a dog just to chain it to a tree to live in a doghouse. Like, why are you even getting a dog?
As the years have gone by, when I first started, it was not uncommon to pull into a driveway and see a doghouse and a dog on a chain. It was actually half and half. Now I go, oh, because I don't see it that often anymore.
Right. Thank God.
Because we have changed our way of thinking so much that you don't see that as often.
Unfortunately, some of it's cultural. I live by the Indian reservation, and they call them res dogs because they're not treated very well. They're not treated like your home. I mean, mostly they're just what they call redneck doorbells. They're outside to bark if they see anything. But if you look at the situation that they're stuck in, one is they're all chained. And I've yet to meet a dog who's chained and isn't insane. These poor animals are tormented right into insanity. Two is the igloos are a big thing there. I notice that most of the dogs have the igloo, and they are kept out there 24/7. And apparently they're taken care of because they're alive, but it's a sad thing every time I drive through there and I see all the dogs that are just terribly neglected. There just isn't a warm and fuzzy feeling when it comes to their dogs. They're not really pets. They're just tools. And I've probably shouldn't say this, but I've seen the same behavior with, I won't mention them, I'll just indicate it's a religious cult type of group that uses horses and buggies, and they're not treating their dogs very well. They tend to be puppy mills, which is a whole story in itself that I like to see hopefully disappearing in the future, are puppy mills. And I have a dog myself who's a victim of one of these groups, and he's a puppy. He came to me with Lyme disease and a blind eye and double hip dysplasia. I mean, and I'm not defending them when I say it, but they sold the dogs they thought were decent and were only going to drown the last 3. So, of course, at the shelter here, accepted all 3 of those dogs, and we found nice homes for them. One of them is mine, but he's the happiest dog I've ever met, and he's a good guy. He just came with a boatload of issues that we're slowly taking care of.
That's definitely another topic that we really should discuss at some point, because one of the things that I found during my studies through Penn Foster that Tom sent me through to take the course for dog obedience and trainer was mind-blowing, a couple of the facts. But one fact was that the United States does not mandate genetic testing. All other countries internationally do mandate genetic testing, but the United States does not, which was mind-blowing to me. So, but again, we have a whole nother topic on that for sure.
It all does stem from a similar topic that we're all discussing today, which is the taking care of these dogs, how we're supposed to take care of them, and what are the standards of care that obviously some countries do better than other countries in certain things. And then there are some things I'm sure that America does that's better than other countries, but it's all depending on society and depending on how many animals we have and what we can do to treat them. And a lot of it boils down to politics and money, which really mess things up for not just animals, but everything in general.
Right.
And if I may reiterate, a lot of it's a cultural problem. You know, people who just believe differently than we do. So to some groups and some cultures in this country, they're not pets, they're not animals, they're just product. And that's all they really are, no different than a vegetable. And it's hard for some of us to believe this, but I know we're getting away from the subject a little bit. I want to jump back into hoarding just for a second, because I think it's important to just talk about, maybe for a couple seconds, some of the cases we have been involved with.
Sure.
And let's start out with the 44 Chihuahuas.
Yeah. Yeah, so I received a call on my birthday. Actually, we were cutting my birthday cake. And I received a phone call from the sheriff's department that someone had turned in a complaint that there were multiple dogs at a residence, and they thought it was something I needed to look into. So I went up with a deputy, and it was already getting dark. And he told me he had over 40 dogs, and they were in a box that was like a large crate that you'd put like a lab in the back of your car with, and then the next size down. In those two crates were 44 Chihuahuas on top of each other.
Acting like sardines.
Oh my gosh.
So I got him, he had a porch. I got him to block the porch off and let them free roam on the back of until morning, because there's no way. I was afraid that they would get loose and we'd lose a whole bunch of them. So, and then the
That
next
was a very rural area. We would have had dogs running through the hills of Wyoming County. It would have been a disaster.
So he had a porch that he had put wire around the outside of, and it was covered. So we got them out of the crates, put the crates in the side of the yard, and so we could get pictures of them in the morning. And then I got a gang of volunteers, and we went up and picked those dogs up. So while we're up there getting them, there was one deceased in the pile when we got them out of the crates. And I asked the man several times, did you have any more? Do you have any more? No. Then about like 8 hours later, I get a phone call from a friend of his and said, you need to go back up. And I went up, and in a closet, he had a crate, and he had 4 more in the crate in the closet. So
Yeah.
it actually ended up with 48.
And the goal for that whole day was the volunteers don't get bit. We've got to collect 43 dogs in the beginning. 43 dogs without getting bit. These dogs were terrified.
They were.
And we had to catch them with the red leash, the famous red leash, get them in kennels, get them transported to the shelter, get them out of the kennels into the large shelter kennels, then out of the shelter kennels to be triaged medically, and then back in the kennels, and back out of the kennels to be all have some kind of emergency grooming. We had some volunteer groomers here. Mm-hmm. And then back into the kennels. And it was just an amazing day of don't get bit.
Yeah, exactly.
On that note, I think anyone who is listening to this, if you remember this case when it happened, what was it, in 2013? 2013. That was before Animal Friends was established. We weren't established until 2015. So I just want to give a shout out. If you know these people or you are these people, thank you so much. And someone, if you know them, thank them. People like Tom Purcell, who's sitting right next to me, myself, Bridget Mertzak, Verna Brooks. I know I'm going to miss a couple of them, but Jennifer Wright, Jill Kelly, Deborah Soffer, Lisa Rennig. Yep. Amazing group of individuals at that time were just volunteers at the animal shelter. And thanks to Bridget's organizing, we got them all together. We went up that morning with Officer Goodell to see the situation. And it was bad. That was pretty bad. And it was thanks to all of us working together under the guise of Officer Goodell that we were able to get them transported to the animal shelter, penned up 3 at a time in each pens. And we had to separate them from certain ones because you had the bully ones that were, you could tell what they were by how grotesquely obese they were and how aggressive they were to the others. We had to separate them from the very small runts. Most of these dogs, by the way, were all inbred. It was that bad of a hoarding situation that who knows who bred who type thing. The mammary tumors, my gosh, were sometimes as big as their heads, if not bigger, on a lot of them. And it blew my mind. But getting them all into the pens, taking them out, photographing them for evidence. I remember, I believe it was Amy's fluffy groomer. I think her name was Amy, something with fluffy in it from Batavia. She saw it and heard about it. She came down here with her stuff and volunteered her time, and a couple other groomers did. I think Jen Snow was one of them too. Snow. Yep. Amazing individuals that give their time. Perry Vet helped a lot with some of these mammary masses, both the Yorkshire office and Perry office, and just amazing that the news coverage was huge
It
for
was.
Wyoming County and for Wyoming County Animal Shelter in particular.
Mhm, it was.
Yeah, it was NBC in Buffalo. Channel 2 did a great job. And subsequently, it was very healthy for a potential unhealthy situation. Overwhelming Wyoming County with this many dogs. Didn't know what to do, but thanks to Channel 2, people wanted to volunteer their services, but also what we needed, things like bleach and towels and blankets, and
The donations.
the response of the public was incredible and overwhelming.
Yeah.
And this many years later, it's still overwhelming.
It is.
Mhm.
This is a great county. Very caring people, for sure.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
great.
It was thanks to the team that we had here, the volunteers and animal control officers, that we were able to get that successfully done. The donations that came through. Yeah.
Everybody got adopted.
Yes, I'm
Everybody
sure
did.
that was a struggle for you, because it's one thing you hear about this tragedy and someone's like, oh, I can take a puppy, I can help. But you still have to go through your normal vetting process, because you don't want to do it just because you're going to do it and be one of those heroes. You need to make sure as animal control that it's going to go to a forever home.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want these dogs to go right back into a situation where they just get out of,
Exactly.
you know, so.
Exactly. Yeah. So vetting 44, 48 dogs, new owners, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
In such a short period of time, too.
A lot of sleepless days.
Mhm.
You'd come here and they were all over the lawn, remember? With blankets holding dogs. People just came
That's a
to,
good point. A lot of these
Yep.
dogs had never been held.
right?
A lot of these dogs never saw grass before. They didn't know anything. They were just cooped up and cramped up. And it was one of the worst tragedies I had ever seen. It turned out to be a great story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And,
And it was 3 years later we took the course. So that was one of the reasons why I was just so like, how could someone do what they did? And yeah.
well, the person that was the suspect of this, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the person's house that you went to that had these dogs, it was his father or his son?
Father.
It was his father from Batavia that actually had these dogs, couldn't take care of them. That's why he's classified as the overwhelmed caregiver.
Right.
He just had so many. He either didn't know what to do, didn't have the money to take care of them, whatever it may be. Obviously, a tragic, devastating situation that he put himself and these dogs into, and dumped them off at his son's.
Yeah, I think it was a,
He really thought he was going to set up a situation that was going to make him a lot of money.
yeah.
It's sad.
And he was held on a $10,000 bond, charged with 44 counts of animal abuse and falsely reporting an incident, which that was back in 2013. That was allowed to do. I can tell you right now for a fact, he would not today, if that happened, be held on that $10,000 bond, because it's deemed a non-violent offense now to animal hoard. That got downgraded. I think Governor Cuomo
Just short of
downgraded.
murderers.
Right.
Yep.
No, but
Right.
Yeah. no,
I don't want to get into these politics on that. But,
yeah, not to get into politics,
right.
but anyone who decided that that was right is stupid. Because
Well,
there's a reason why you put bonds that high for crimes this devastating, this tragic, so they don't happen again. You set a statement, and they rescinded that now.
Right. And then the other incident, of course,
Yes.
was our 100 plus, and it ranged from 115 to maybe up to 200 cats we had in locally in Wyoming County.
Smallwood.
Just had to handle there. What an amazing story that was.
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
so talk about overwhelming.
Yeah, so
about this.
Talk about that, the Smallwood cat case. That,
Yep. So I received a call that there was an issue at a house and someone thought we needed to look into it. So I had about 7 places to go that morning and I went for a ride and that was like number 3. And that was my last case for the day. So I knocked on the door and I knew something was wrong when the flies were covering one side of the building. I mean, I knocked on the door and the flies were like buzzing, right, like swarming around me. I'm like, why would the flies stick to a house like that? Then I'm like, man, something doesn't smell right. And when the sweet lady opened the door, she wasn't an older lady either. She was filthy and she was between her toes, looked like mud, but it was feces. She was barefooted.
gosh.
And it was, I got her to come outside and asked her if she had a problem. And she looked down at the ground. No, I love them all. And I said, I need to know how many you have. She opened the door and let me step in. I didn't go in far because it was so bad. and I saw a couch that was all like pulled apart, and the bottom was open, and the cushions were torn all up. And I started counting sets of eyes, and when I got to about 40 just on the couch, I'm like, oh boy. And then I'm glancing around, and they're everywhere. They're sitting in crock pots. And it was, yeah. So I closed the door, and told her she needed to get dressed because she was just in a t-shirt. And
We have a few dog guests here today, so just sorry about that.
so I called law enforcement. I said, I think I need some help. When the state police came, they were devastated. They didn't know what to do. And I think the hardest part was the dog that was found. And just to recap on the cats, 8 were found dead. 17 had to be euthanized. And the rest of them were split up amongst a zillion shelters, so took in a few here and there. And Batavia Daily came out and took photos of some of the cats in cages with some of us working. And it wasn't within 12 hours of that paper going out that I received calls of people who had been missing the cat they saw in the cage on the paper. And like, oh my gosh. So the person had been going around collecting cats in the towns that she see walking around. She just take them.
Sure, she believed that she was saving them.
Yeah. She was that caregiver.
She was
hoarder.
a rescue hoarder.
Or rescue hoarder,
Yeah,
too.
because she classified herself as a rescue, and you had asked her for
Right.
papers of proof of stuff like that.
And also, she would help people if they were going on vacation. She'd take their cats and let them be housed there. And people didn't know how bad it was there. They had no idea.
She said she was getting donations, and then she'd help people out with food and things like that. And if I remember right, she did have a small pocket file that had 3 or 4 of only 3 or 4, really was very small number compared to the vast, overwhelming population of cats there, that had a picture there here or a medical record here. So it made it look like, at face value, okay, you are operating as some sort of a rescue type situation.
Yeah.
She wasn't registered for one thing in any capacity, 501c3, nothing, no identification saying that she's deemed as a rescue. And I wonder if she just did that just for a face value in case she encountered someone who was questioning her. Because there's no denying when you opened her door how it reeked in there. There's not anything that was not white at all. It was horrible.
Yeah, they tore the house down.
Yes, they did.
That's how
just to
bad it
touch on the dog, because it is relevant of her state of mind. She had a box up in the loft of the garage, and inside the wooden box was a dog. The dog, by the time we found it, was deceased. But the vet told us that this dog 24 hours ago was alive.
Yes.
Probably not going to survive anyway because we believe it was starved to death.
Oh my gosh.
But this is just to show you her state of mind wasn't healthy.
And there was cases and cases of food.
There was
and
dog food.
Dog food.
Dog
Yep.
food.
That's why I kept going back to I kept saying, why is there canine food here, dog food here? Do you have dogs? No, and even the deputy, I think he asked her 3 times. That's what angered him the most when we found the dog. Because we had asked, do you have a dog? And he probably was living at the time we were asking those questions. He was probably still alive.
Dog.
How long did it go on, the case in itself? Like from the day you knocked on the door, so you got...
Oh, within 24 hours.
within
everything was
24
taken
hours,
out.
you got everything out.
Yeah.
Well, we were there I feel like we were there a couple of days just catching
The
cats.
second day we found the dog. Yeah. It
Oh,
took
okay.
a couple days to get her
Yeah.
cleaned out.
Yeah, meantime, state police was dealing with their own, because there was a state trooper, from my
Yep.
understanding, that went with you on that case. I remember the garage was detached from the house. So I remember when you pull in, there's a garage in front of you, the house is to your left. And I was tasked with going through, because she not only hoarded cats, her garage was full of everything. I saw PlayStation boxes. I saw all these TV boxes, anything you could think of, newspapers. It was hoarded in there. And at the top, when you go into the back of the garage and you look up, there's like a thin staircase.
Like a ladder.
Yes. And then to your left and to your right were these big boxes, what Tom was describing as part of the loft. And I was tasked, because I was able to maneuver through all of it. No one else could. go through there to see if there was anything in there or not, because my mom, Justa, Officer Goodell, you had suspected her of lying. The deputy had suspected her of lying, even though you guys asked her multiple times point blank, do you have a dog? And she kept saying no. So I was able to go up there, and right to the left, I remember crawling up there, and I could hardly open up the door because it was full of feces, like stuffed right to the door. But as soon as I was able to get in enough and I looked in, there was this deceased dog laying down.
And he hadn't been dead very long because he was still very movable.
Yep.
You brought him down over your shoulder.
Yep. And then Dr. Stoddard was there from Perry Vet. He was tasked to come out there to vaccinate, to anything that they needed for identification, whatever, health checks of these cats as we got them out. And that's when he said that based on his body temperature and how unstiff the dog was still, it was within the past
24 hours.
Yeah.
Probably was alive when we were standing in the driveway.
Yeah. But it was also too far gone for us to do
Very
anything,
sad. Yeah.
even if we found
And she had hundreds of pounds of food, dog food.
Yeah.
I hope she was
Even
arrested. She was
feel it.
arrested, correct? Come on.
She was.
Yeah, this is crazy.
One more story I'd like to touch on, which to this day we'll never know if it was hoarding or a puppy mill gone wrong, but we had recovered, well, a Wyoming County resident had recovered basically 15 dogs in cages in the middle of
Hiram Road.
Hiram Road.
Yep.
And that was a bizarre case because you really couldn't tell what it was, but it was 6 puppies, 7 yearlings, and 2 adult male dogs. And the 2 adult male dogs were tied to the outside, right? And this resident, this incredibly
Brave
wonderful lady and gentleman, started picking these cages up and putting them into her van to get them here to the shelter. And this was very late at night. Correct?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
2 in
Their
the
headlights
morning.
saw their eyes. Yeah. It was that kind of.
So what happened is they're on Hiram Road. They came over this little knoll, and the road lit up with eyeballs. They thought deer, But the closer they got, there weren't deer. There were cages, 2 large cages with all these eyeballs inside.
Yeah.
And they stopped and tried to figure out. And this wasn't on the side of the road. These were in the road. So one of the dogs had chewed his rope off, and he was in the bushes while they were putting the cages in and ready to slam the doors shut. Mr. hiding in the bushes came flying out and jumped in because he didn't want to lose his pack.
Yeah.
And the best memory I have of this, and just so you can straighten me out, but everybody put when the van pulled up to the shelter here and they opened the door, Mr. hiding in the bushes took off down the road, disappeared. Well, Justa and crew secured the rest of the dogs in the kennels, the 6 puppies, 7 yearlings, and 1 adult now. But when Justa got here the next morning, he opened the door because he was laying on the outside. He still wanted his pack.
Yeah.
So what happened when you opened the door?
Oh, he shot it. Well, I used the office door and opened the back, and then because he didn't want to come near me, so I opened the very back side door and stood and watched him slowly creep in. Then when I didn't see him going anymore, I shot in and shut that door. So then I had him locked in the building. And then he just decided not to be happy with me. He got in where our boiler is, and I had to use a pole. And my boy scraped his face up pretty bad because he wanted me, but I got him in a pen.
He was attacking Justin,
Yeah.
what he was doing. And then, to make a long story short, that particular dog, Justin named him Luke.
Yep.
Oh, that's
And-
Luke.
And that was the infamous Luke.
He was here almost a week, shy of a week of a year.
Before I could, and it was a week before I could touch him.
Yeah.
I sat in his cage and got spit on and growled at.
He was a nasty
He
guy.
turned out, after living here for a year, to be the sweetest, most
Mm-hmm.
kind dog and friendly dog. And he lived with me for several years before we just lost him last year.
Yeah.
But, the point of that I'm trying to make is you just can't judge a dog by his emotion when you first meet him.
No.
Because he was apparently the patriarch of this puppy mill gone bad or whatever the heck it was. But he was a scary dog.
Yeah.
And he turned out just to be the greatest guy. Everybody loved Luke.
I drove around for hours looking for him, all around Miller. I catch him, caught wind his back end going between two houses down on Weathersfield Road, and I did everything. Then I couldn't. I called the sheriff's department and said, if someone hits a big black dog, it got free from us with that group of dogs we brought in, and they said okay. And no report of anything. I come here and he was curled up by the door. He knew where his family was.
Yeah, he's still under his family.
Yeah, this goes to true loyalty of a dog. Yeah.
So I'd like to also touch upon one of the biggest cases in our area too, probably the most infamous one when it comes to animal hoarding. In February of 2012, the Wyoming County SPCA, they had a raid. And can you tell us about your involvement with that or anything that you know?
Well, they called me. I knew when it was going to happen, but because it was all cat related and they brought in the SPCA from Erie County to handle the case, I really wasn't that involved with it other than we knew there had been a problem. A lot of reporting had been done, but they just, every time they would go up to investigate, there would be a small number of, cats there. They couldn't find all the cats, so I think they got tipped off and would take them out. So I got called because there was 3 canines there and had to bring them here, and was kind of part of that raid during that time. But that was a shocker. Closed the building down and ended up being a lot of drama there going on. But we knew there was a problem. Another case of a rescue hoarding, where everybody thought it was.
Because we have that labeled down here as one of those exploiter hoarders.
Yeah.
Hoarders. That, if I remember right, it was whoever was their board president at the time. I believe it was Sue DeVille. She has since then passed away. That was a big investigation in Wyoming County. I'll read to you just a snippet of what the Batavia Daily had put on that case. Every cupboard, every closet, cats would walk out. There were crevices in the walls cats were coming out of. Even from the end of the driveway, Gina Browning knew there was a big problem inside the small ranch house. The stench cut through the 30-degree winter air and reached her and the police who arrived to investigate. That was a big ordeal in Wyoming County. It looks like here that animal control had took one of the dogs as the others were being unlawfully kenneled, from my understanding, which rescues like that aren't allowed to kennel. So that was a big no right there. These were stacked upon stacked of crates in their basement all over. And
in the walls and the ceilings, yeah.
Even to today, that stained the reputation of Wyoming County when it comes to SPCA. Mm-hmm. You talk to anybody that was around since then, that they don't have such of a good taste in their mouth when they hear of that because of the horrible condition these animals are kept in. 518 cats, 3 dogs.
That's why it kind of stings us when some people say, "Oh, you're the SPCA." No, we are not. We are the animal shelter of Wyoming County.
But I would like to want to stand on that. There's been a lot of change, and it's much better. Things are much better there. So, and they're doing good work. But unfortunately, it was a hard thing to climb out of.
Right.
And for any organization, that would be hard to get that. But they have worked hard to change the opinions of people, and they do a lot of good work in the county. So
they are redeeming themselves too. It's just it's sad when a case like that happens because it trickles down to any other nonprofit or rescue group in the same area.
Yes, because people start to distrust.
Yes, and then they all associate everyone's with everyone type thing. Sure. That's why we're always, as animal friends, constantly saying we're not from SPCA, we're not from Attica, we're in Rock Glen, we're in Silver Springs, Warsaw area, we're animal friends, to show that there are other groups out there if you still don't like the SPCA, which, to be honest, they are redeeming themselves. So let's give them the credit where the credit is due. But that rocked Wyoming County for a while in the paper, in the news and everything. And so,
which I think that goes back to mental health, though. I mean, it was a volunteer, if I'm not correct on that, was involved in that, and so she was hoarding, not in her home, but she was hoarding at the SPCA. Because from what I understood, even a little bit I was working at the time. I wasn't involved with the shelter here, but I heard that people would go to adopt a cat. And every time somebody went in, there was like a gazillion cats, and every cat that they would point to, I'd like to see that one. Oh, that one's adopted. That one, like nobody could ever really adopt a cat from there. So, I shouldn't say that it wasn't the entity or the whole of the SPCA. It was one individual that tainted that for them. But I think policy and procedure changed, so there was more control on. So one person couldn't just.
Yeah, there was a lot of changes that happened after that.
Right.
So it was more monitored. It's now more controlled in that regard because they don't want anything like that to happen again. So I'm sure that they've definitely cleaned up their act a lot, and it doesn't look the same as it used to. So those are just some of the cases that Officer Goodell has dealt with here in Wyoming County. We talked about the 5 freedoms that she looks for when she goes out on dog calls and cases like that. And we've touched upon the 3 different types of animal hoarders. I just want to throw it out there so we have it recorded here, a couple of facts that we have of animal hoarding. The exact definition of an animal hoarder is an individual who possesses more than the typical number of companion animals and is unable to provide minimal standards of nutrition, sanitation, shelter, and veterinary care, with this neglect often resulting in starvation, illness, and death. And in every one of the cases that Officer Goodell has mentioned here, we've talked about at length, that all of those have been checked off as there was starvation, there was illness, there's been death, on improper care, nutrition, sanitation, shelter, everything like that. Cats and dogs are the most hoarded of all animals, although there have been cases of snakes. I think you have dealt with
Spiders, snakes. It's odd.
Spiders. Oh
Yeah. Chickens, people just can't. Yeah.
I can imagine rats too.
Sure.
Hoarders usually keep to themselves. They're very isolated.
Yeah, I got some things that I could read off, if you didn't mind.
Please do.
And for all of us to just ponder, because some of them may reflect even on ourselves. But it says it can be difficult to determine whether someone is a hoarder or just a pack rat, someone who just likes to hang on to things. The main determiner is whether a behavior is just a personal preference or a disorder. Usually has to do with whether or not and how much that behavior has begun to negatively impact daily functioning. Here are general recognized symptoms of hoarding from the Mayo Clinic: cluttered living spaces, inability to discard things, keeps stacks of newspaper, magazines, or junk mail, moving items from one pile to another without discarding anything, acquiring unneeded or seemingly useless items, including trash, difficulty managing daily tasks, procrastinating and trouble making decisions, a difficulty organizing items, perfectionism, excessive attachment to possessions or discomfort letting others touch or borrow possessions, limited to no social interaction. They're either limited or they have no social interaction. It says that some of these things, while age of severe hoarding is most common, middle-aged adults around the age of 50, our hoarding tendencies begin around the ages of 11 and 15. During these early teenage years, they typically saved broken toys, outdated school papers, and pencil nubs. Personality, they struggle with severe indecisiveness and anxiety. Genetics is one of the things they look at. Although hoarding is not an entirely genetic disorder, there are some genetic predispositions involved in the disorder. Trauma. Many hoarders experience a stressful or traumatic event that propels them to hoard as a coping mechanism. Social isolation. Hoarders are often socially withdrawn or isolated, causing them to hoard as a way to find comfort. So some of these things you may see in people that make you wonder. And if you never have gone to their home, you may find out that they are hoarders of some kind. These are disorders that you can kind of move into quickly and move from that collector to that hoarder.
Yeah, and the cases that we've talked about, the 3 common types of animal hoarders, as you have said, Officer Goodell, is that since since you've taken your class, they've been trying to break down the different types of animal hoarders into their own categories.
They call them models.
Models, yes.
And I'm sure since the course, they've even splintered them off more. But, we look at particular things. You really have to look at how that person got started, how they're doing it, and all that.
So just the rundown, the basic indicators of certain types of hoarders, the three common types at least. The overwhelmed caregiver is the first one. They provide adequate care. They have a strong attachment. They have fewer issues with authorities. They have some awareness, and more reality-based. They are they're your typical person out there that just has too many to the quantity does not meet the quality of care that each animal needs, and they know they're in trouble. And those are the ones that usually, if you catch them at that time or that spot, or they recognize it themselves, they reach out to animal control or to rescues and say, "Hey, I have a dozen cats. I can't take care of them the way I'm supposed to. Can you help me with rehome?"
Some do. I don't think they reach out very often. I truly don't. They consider them their animals, their family members, to the point of not being able to even let somebody examine them. It gets, and their self-esteem is attached to that animal, those animals. So it's the more they have, the better they feel. It's all, I've got to care for them. It's a self-feeding thing.
It gives them purpose. So they're isolated and they really find purpose in life by taking in all these animals or things, whatever they hoard. But so they're taking care of things, but it's, they don't understand that it's a mental illness. They feel like they are doing well. And even if they get overwhelmed with it, they feel like if they didn't love them, nobody else would, or nobody else would take care of them like they do.
And they're typically not good problem solvers.
Right.
So I would see if I had 20 cats that I had a problem, I can't get them to the vet, or my house is starting to smell. They can't get to that point.
Right.
They're not good problem solvers. They're just overwhelmed with it too. So, but their self-esteem is so linked to it that it's hard to get in there to tell them they've got a problem. They really see themselves as they're the only ones really, that can take care of things. Then the rescue hoarder, they're really on a mission. They, no matter what, they're gonna, and they have a terrible fear of death. A rescue hoarder. They feel if they don't rescue them, they're all going to die, and they've got to be rescued, and so they're afraid of that.
They don't understand that they will die with all the disease that they're getting from being so many animals and not vaccinated, and the fleas and ticks and everything.
And
else.
A rescue hoarder often has a lot of enablers. There's a lot of people who are out there helping them out, and that's what we saw. We saw them in all the cases, except the one on Wyoming, but that would be typical of what we found at the SPCA. There was a lot of people helping that woman do it. They thought she was doing good, but little they know 500 cats in a ranch house was not going to be good.
Right.
I don't know if they realized how bad it had gotten, but they usually have a lot of enablers, those type of hoarders. The exploiter hoarder is really got some problems, and they have no empathy for people or animals. It's all for what they can do when they can do it. So they have no guilt, no remorse. They're manipulative. They're cunning. We've had a couple cases where that we've dealt with where it's just they reject anybody's concern. So they're the tough ones. They usually have had run-ins with law enforcement for some reason or another. So. Those are the three that we kind of learned about when we took the course in 2016. And
they're very manipulative, has animals strictly to serve their own needs. You had studied when you were taking this course 3 of the most famous, or infamous, we should say, types of people that are classified as these different types of hoarders. We won't touch upon them too much, but if anyone wants to go and look up some of these most infamous cases, there's an example of the overwhelmed caregiver. There's a book called Inside Animal Hoarding, the case of Barbara Erickson and her 552 dogs. That's a case based in Oregon in the United States. And it's a quite an interesting book. I know you've read it and learned a lot from that. There is a good example of a rescue hoarder, a well-known infamous case, a woman by the name of Kimmy Peck. She was arrested hoarding dogs in a recreational vehicle. She operated as a rescue that was closed down in 2010. She's hoarded at least 205 dogs. This is a case out in Colorado. And there is, if I understand it right, there's even a Facebook group called Where the Heck is Kimmy Peck?
Yep.
Just keeping track of her whereabouts, and that she's been under many different names for rescues out there. I mean, I don't remember all of them on the top of my head, of course, but I remember seeing the list, like This Little Light. There's some, all these different rescue names that she just went under. And it's quite interesting to read through and be like, how are these people keep getting away with this stuff? And the most infamous, well-known case of an exploiter hoarder, which was very hard to, not only to say exploiter hoarder, but to nail down and figure out. And I'm hoping this is her actual legal name, because she's been known by many names. Her name is Vicki Kittles. She has a history of animal hoarding from 1993 to 2006, spanning all over the United States from the southeast to the northwest. She's kept over 100 dogs, over 100 cats, several chickens in a school bus as she traveled around. She's also hoarded horses. I think you had also mentioned that when she traveled with her mom, and when her mom passed away, she fed her mom to the dogs.
Well, they couldn't find her mother, and they thought she was buried somewhere in Florida. Well, then she finally admitted in jail that she did what her mother said, and she let her animals eat her. So...
Had multiple run-ins of the law, unknown number of animals hoarded between 93 and 2006. And she's, from my understanding, isn't she still out there?
You know, I don't know. These go back to the 2000 and 1997. The last I have anything on it was 2003 or 2006, I guess, is the last I saw.
Well, let's just be mindful that if you're a hoarder and you're an animal hoarder, there's very slim chance you'll ever be healed of this illness that you have. It's about 100%.
It is, unless you receive treatment. The whole idea of going in, I think if you ever watch Hoarders on TV, that's a good way of kind of summarizing this whole thing. And watch a couple of those episodes. When they go in, they try to work with people. Years ago, they thought they'd just go in and clean it up and everything would be better. There wouldn't be any problem. But what happens is within 24 hours, she's going to bark. Within 24 hours, somebody goes back to collecting another cat. If you went in and, come here, Charlotte, come here. If you went in and cleaned up somebody's hoard, within 24 hours, they're going to pick up their next cat.
Yep.
And they found out it's 100% return to the habit. The only way to really fix it is that they become part of the cleanup and they get treatment. And then it's a follow-up. It's a follow-up. It's a follow-up. If you just go in and clean it up, they're just going back and doing it again. So they discovered that after trying to do it the other way, forcing them to clean up, taking everything from them, and then going back to, then they go back and it's as bad as it was before or worse. So I think that's a good way to sum this whole thing up. If you're a hoarder, you've got to have the help. You've got to receive the help.
If you recognize any of these things in yourself while you're listening to this podcast, or maybe a family member that something's not right, a lot of times hoarders, they don't want anybody to come in their house. So back in their mind, they actually know that there's something going on, and they're embarrassed that things have gotten out of control. But if you know somebody that won't let you in their house, and you know that they possibly have a hoarding situation going on, seek help. Just reach out to somebody and start the ball rolling. And it's best for the person, it's best for the animals.
Yeah, in case anyone is interested when they're hearing about this they're thinking, well, what does the law have to say about animal hoarding? Because there's animal cruelty laws, there's things of that nature. I have in front of me some of the data that we had that I'll just touch upon it briefly for anyone who's curious and interested. Most of this stems back from 2010. There really hasn't been too much established since then. But as far as established laws, there are only 2 states of all 50 states that have established animal hoarding laws. In Illinois, back in 2001, they enacted the Humane Care for Animals Act, which specifies who is an animal hoarder, so they can recognize it legally on who is one and be able to prosecute and move forward from there. And then in 2008, Hawaii has the hoarding law that was added to their penal code. It's the strictest law of any of the laws established in regards to animal hoarding, but it also has a lot of loopholes, so it's kind of hard for them to nail down when someone is violating that law. As of 2010, there are only 2 extra states that were pending laws. One of them was Michigan and one of them is New Jersey. I still don't know at this moment if they're still pending, they're just waiting for votes, or there's just on the back burner because there's a whole bunch of other things coming up the pike more important, but that's in regards to animal hoarding. And then as of 2010, there were 3 laws that were unsuccessful. And when you learn about puppy mills and things of that nature, you can see where the big money and the political aspect of things comes in the line, where some of these bills don't get passed because no one's making a gain from it. Montana, New Mexico, and Vermont were 3 states that had laws that were sent out, but they were unsuccessful in being passed and signed by the governors. So that is definitely something that needs to be addressed more so. I think New York State is going to be on that list now with this new law that they're enacting as part of, we've touched upon it already. You probably have heard of it on this podcast already a little bit, but you're going to hear a lot more as we're learning more of the new Ag and Markets law, Article 7C, I believe it is, in regards to rescues and shelters and things of that nature on how they're supposed to be properly taken care of. So maybe you could classify New York State as one of those that has a successful animal hoarding law. Who knows? We'll see how that all plays out with everything that we're doing. But yeah, if anyone is interested in learning a little bit more about this, Officer Goodell has a PowerPoint presentation. You could book her today. Call down to the Wyoming
I'm sure
County
she
Animal
needs one more
Shelter.
phone call.
Right.
I love doing that.
It
Yeah.
is fun. Her and myself, we go out.
We spent a whole winter doing it. Yep.
We go to town clerks. We go to your nonprofits. We go to your schools. We go anywhere you want. And we bring a PowerPoint presentation, and we have a TV and everything. And she can talk to you more in depth about animal hoarding. So call the Wyoming County Animal Shelter, 585-786-8938, if you are interested to talk to Officer Goodell. Excuse me. Go to our website, animalfriendsofwyco.com, to see all the references and links to what Officer Goodell's talked about, so you can learn a little bit more if you're interested. Is there anything else you want to add, or something you want our listeners to go walk away with? Part of this podcast, anything you want them to remember in particular?
Well, if you think there's a situation where animals are not being cared for properly, it doesn't matter how small it is or how big it is. Give us a call. We'll knock on the door and check. Oftentimes, it isn't as bad as you think. We do get calls like this all the time. Went on one last week, and it just looked bad, but it wasn't. So, give us a call and say, hey, this person, I think, needs some help. And we go in carefully and try to respect their rights to do and live the way they want. But if the animals are suffering in some way, then we have to discuss it more. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look these things up online. Like I said, we're going to have a reference page on our website, animalfriendsofwyco.com, under the podcast and videos section, our CHOW Project. So you go look up things on your own and call and ask questions. Call your local humane investigator, animal control officer, if you suspect there's animal hoarding going on in your area. So, yeah, let's definitely try to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Any way that we can.
You might be the only eyes that see it. So call it in.
If you see something, say something.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid, because worst case scenario or the best case scenario, it turns out to be nothing. But you don't want there to be something brewing in your community like that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
If you got a dog or cat, or maybe a mole, there's no need to be a fool. Ask us a question, we're ready to go. This is the question part of the show. Ask us about the show.
And now we're going to get to the part of the podcast where our members can ask questions for our guests. And so we have a couple of them for you today, Officer
Okay.
Goodell.
Sounds good.
All right, let's see. So Heather from Perry would like to know, is hoarding in general or animal hoarding illegal?
No. In most states, no. In our state, no. What becomes illegal is when it crosses over the line for public health laws. And when it comes to animals being neglected, then it goes into the ag and market laws. So those are the two laws that can come in together. But in general, someone who collects too much stuff, which is kind of the definition of hoarding, is not it is not illegal. They're not committing a crime, but they are making their life and possibly the community's life tough place to live.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I think we mentioned that we did mention that a couple minutes ago. There's only like 3 states that we know of, at least updated since 2010 from our research, that actually have animal hoarding laws, either in their penal code, like it is in Hawaii, or actual laws that have been passed.
Right.
And since animals are deemed property, it technically is kind of like having Barbie dolls or suitcases or whatever or tractors.
The difference between hoarding animals and tractors or Barbie dolls or stuffed animals is they don't go to the bathroom and need medical care because they're an object, not a living creature. So it's illegal when it crosses the lines into several other laws. But in general, to be a hoarder, if you're not breaking any health laws or any animal laws, it's not. That I know of. They classify it as a mental illness. So that's as far as I know anyways.
Okay. Let's see. There was another question. Let me have it. See it here. Jillian from Wyoming would like to know, what are typical signs of animal hoarding?
Classic signs are extreme barking, a smell coming from a home, people not, there's animals, but you never see them, cages in the yard, empty bags of garbage with animal waste or products that is just piled up. Those are the type of things you kind of look for in your community. So,
yep. Okay. And let's see. I think I have 2 more questions. Let's see what we have here. Oh, that one I think was answered in part of it, but when it comes to animal hoarding, we've already clarified there could be any type of animal that could be hoarded.
Right. Yep. So, spiders, turtles, reptiles.
Yep.
Snakes.
So one question from one of our members is, can fish be considered animal hoarding if you have too many fish or things of that nature?
Tanks are running and they're being fed, I guess your whole house could be lit up with fish tanks. I don't think, unless there's neglect, I wouldn't consider that a hoarding situation. Their lifespan is much shorter also. But anytime anybody just can't let go of anything and starts having multiple amounts of particular things, that's a hoarder. Whether it's breaking a law or not, or whether we can intervene is another thing. So I don't know if I got a call with somebody had too many fish tanks in their house. I'm not sure how on fire I'd be to knock at the door and make a big deal of it, so.
Yeah. And I guess the last question that I have here actually from our members is, what is in your field when you've seen animal hoarding and animals coming out of a hoarding situation, what is their general demeanor? Have they been changed because of going through a traumatic experience like animal hoarding?
The people or the animals?
The animals.
Oh, the animals.
Is there anything that you would say, oh, those are classic signs that dog probably was neglected through animal hoarding or something.
See, with animals, they don't know the difference between being in a clean environment and the dirty if they've only known dirty. So anytime you move an animal for any reason, even someone who surrenders a dog to the shelter, the stress level is extremely high, even though it's for the better of the dog. Say it was at a breeder and she's not using it to breed anymore and she wants it to give it a good home. We know that's a good thing. That's like a stepping stone into a home. But the dog doesn't see it that way. The dog says, you're taking me out of my environment. The only environment maybe I've known, in the environment I've learned to adjust to, and you're tossing me in. Now you're bathing me, you're walking me, you separated me from my group. There's different smells, a different schedule. My person is not there. Where is she or he? So it's stressful for them. What we see, classic signs of dogs who, especially dogs, and cats, I could say, but especially dogs, is they're usually extremely shy. They're not leash trained. They're probably not potty trained. They've probably not been groomed. They've not been vetted. And if they have, it's been limited or at home. So we're not sure how thorough that vetting process had been for shots and stuff. So we kind of start all over. So they come in a lot of ways crippled in their view of the world. They sometimes don't know stairs. The leash seems to be they'll do like the alligator roll when you start working with them. They start flopping around because to them they're being choked because they've never been on a leash. And the handling of human touch can be frightening to them because they haven't been touched a lot. So
okay, interesting. It's funny when you were giving some of those classic signs of a dog that's been hoarded or been living in that its whole life, and it's not aware of it because it's just been in there. It reminds me of sometimes there's some humans that, they're born into their environment they're in. We on the outside would say, oh, they have dirty houses. They have, they don't have the best schedule, or they have a poor diet, or they have whatever, or say they're secluded from society. Like they are, of a group of people, like they're Native American, born on a reservation. They have no idea, just walking into on the other side of the road, how it's like, or if they're Amish or Mennonite, just the whole difference. Like you grew up in that environment. You don't recognize if you are in the healthiest environment or not.
Yeah, extreme poverty where people are having proper clothing. They're, they don't eat out of bowls, they use their hands. And then you start introducing, embellishing them with the things that we take for granted, but they don't know anything about. Then it's a sudden shock to them. And they don't see what they lived like as wrong for a human until they're shown that this is really how it should be. And you were for whatever reason, whether you're just born into it or you're in a poor section of a city or a country, this is, you were in a bad situation as for you for health reasons. I mean, can you imagine a child who's never seen a doctor at 4 or 5 years old ends up in a doctor's office and look at the environment? I mean, it must be frightening to them. So you kind of have to look at the dog learning. They have no names usually. They've never seen a brush or been combed out. Shampoo and water are frightening to them. I mean, it's a lot it's kind of reconditioning them to a new way of thinking. And I'm sure it must be much more traumatic for a human, but you kind of have to look at it that way. That's how I look at it. It takes a long time. And sometimes they are kind of morphed into that way of living, and they're always frightened. They a lot of the ones from, especially the Chihuahua ones, I heard from people that they still, right up till, there's only a few of them still living because a lot of them time has gone by. But most of them, or a lot of them, never really come out of their shell. They still were withdrawn. They got used to their people, but when company would come or a noise or they felt isolated, they would hide. And the people who adopted them really took on a huge task to make them have some kind of normal life.
Ask us about your pet.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Officer
problem.
Goodell.
It's nice.
And Kelly and Tom. Thank you so much. And tune in. Oh my gosh, tune in to our next episode coming out shortly. Thank you guys so much, and God bless and take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CHOW Podcast, hosted by Animal Friends of Wyoming County. To learn more about us, visit our website at www.animalfriendsofwyco.com. And if you're interested in adopting a dog, please call the Wyoming County Animal Shelter at 585-786-8938. This has been a production of Knox Luna Films, LLC.